Today, I want to talk about wrestling God, about having God's permission and even their eager invitation to ask questions of them and demand answers. And I particularly want to share with you the wisdom that transgender theologians and disability theologians bring to the Bible's most literal account of wrestling with God. One of the strangest stories shared in Scripture is that of Jacob wrestling a mysterious being in the heart of the desert in the dead of night. It's one of those stories that reminds you that the Bible is ancient and alien from our own time and place. The story takes place in the dark night of Jacob's soul, a time when he is overcome with fear and has isolated himself from his loved ones. Into this darkness, the divine enters. For is it not in our most hopeless and lonely and empty moments that we are most open to the Spirit's upturning, her call to transformation? I won't go into too much detail about the identity of the strange being that suddenly confronts Jacob all alone that night. The text of Genesis 32 is not clear about whether this being is a human man or some sort of angel or God herself, but whoever it is that grapples with Jacob all night long, the results of this wrestling match have been a source of affirmation and interest for many transgender and disabled readers. Let's start with disability theology and read a little bit of the Bible passage. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower Jacob, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched out as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Jacob becomes disabled from his wrestling match with God. He will limp forever after, a physical reminder of the night that he grabbed God by the shoulders and refused to let go until he won a blessing. And what is his injury's role in the blessing? Is it part of the blessing? Disability theologians like Kerry Wynn point out that Jacob's sudden impairment does not cause him to give up the fight. His wrestling partner wrenches his hip out of its socket, but Jacob refuses to let go. Wynn says that in our world, we see disability as a weakness or a flaw or even a moral failing, and that we see disabled persons not as winners but as losers. But this Bible story tells us otherwise. As Amos Yong puts it, Jacob the disabled one was no less ferocious after his injury. Jacob does not lose this fight. Furthermore, Jacob does not have to be fixed, his disability cured or healed, in order to receive God's blessing or to continue his covenantal relationship with God. The next part of our Bible passage shows Jacob receiving the name Israel. This man with a mobility impairment becomes the paradigm for all of God's chosen people, their namesake. His disability does not make him less beloved by God or less worthy of this important role. Jacob's new name is where transgender theology comes in, because, of course, a lot of us trans people change our names. When our birth names do not fit us, we discover new ones that reflect whoever God made us to be. Some of us choose our own names, and some of us are given our new names by loved ones, and still more of us, like Jacob turned Israel, experience the hand of the divine in our new names. Austen Hartke is a trans theologian who explains that biblical figures receive new names from God for one of two reasons. either because God is calling them to something brand new, or as a way of naming something that was in that person all along. The being who wrestles with Jacob tells him, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." This new name highlights a key element in Jacob's identity and in his calling. He is one who is not afraid to wrestle the ones whom the world tells him are too big for him, to struggle against his inferior status as second-born, to struggle through his own self-doubts and fears, and to wrestle with God herself, and win a blessing in that struggle. The marginalized persons of this world tend to be the ones most willing to wrestle in this way. As Barbara Brown Taylor puts it, "Who would stick around to wrestle a dark angel all night long if there were any chance of escape? The only answer I can think of is this: someone in deep need of a blessing, someone willing to limp forever for the blessing that follows the wound." My favorite thing about Jacob's story is that it teaches us that those whom the world considers broken or cursed, like disabled persons and trans persons, are the ones whom God chooses as recipients and agents of divine blessing. Not because they necessarily deserve it more, but because they are the ones who need it most, and because they are the ones who most desperately seek it. And what is more, when we come to see the wound as part of the blessing, it turns the world's notions of blessing on its head. We would do well to ponder, is there a blessing to be had in my disability, despite what the world tells me? Is there a holiness in my queerness, even though the world calls it sin or sickness? We want to be blessed with riches and power, with security and control. But Jacob's blessing comes with a wound and a transformation so bone deep that he needs a new name. I want to close with a poem that I wrote a few years ago when I was wrestling with my calling to gender queerness. The poem is called Peniel, which is the name that Jacob gives to the spot where he wrestles, because he says, "I met God face to face and lived to tell the tale." Let me be Israel a while, Father. Take no offense if I grapple with you all night or longer, and do not hesitate to inflict some damage on me in the struggle. Let it be a fair fight, and let me attempt to beat you, all the while knowing you go easy on me. And when dawn's breaking brings bones yanked out of place, let me say I have seen my God face to face, and let me be so changed, Mother, so intrinsically changed, that I need a new name.